Hi, my name is LaVerne Kappel, and I'm here today to talk to you about my experiences with this wonderful community that we call the People Program. In 2001, after retiring from 30 years of service with the Orleans Public Schools, I was finishing a graduate degree in gerontology at the University of New Orleans, and I needed a practicum to fulfill credits for the degree. One of my friends who was in the program with me had arranged her practicum in the Alzheimer's unit at Terrell Hospital, and she encouraged me to come with her and be kind of her partner. And I went with her one day, and it was not what I was looking for. It just did not sit with me as something I knew I would enjoy. And I knew I was looking for something that helped people stay healthy and engaged. And shortly thereafter, there was an article in the Times-Picayune about the People Program. So I approached my advisor at UNO, and she encouraged me to contact People Program, which I did. So in the fall of 2001, I was a volunteer teacher fulfilling the requirements of my practicum, and I taught 4 classes. Yoga, of course, a dance class, a poetry class, and I hosted a small seminar for breast cancer survivors, because at that point I was a year away from my original diagnosis of breast cancer. And I also volunteered to be the campus photographer, and my goal was by the end of the semester to have several carousels of slides available to people who could go out into the community and do outreach to bring more people to the People Program. Well, of course, we all know that in September of 2001, the world changed, and it changed very dramatically. I had been at People Program in my classes for about 3 weeks when September the 11th happened. And I called the office and said, what should I do? And Joyce Dassey, who was the assistant director, said, please come, we're having a program this afternoon. So in a matter of hours, the leadership of People Program, the sisters, volunteers from the program, had put together a very moving and supportive opportunity for us to meet in the chapel, pray, meditate, encourage each other to have peaceful hearts, to comfort each other in the loss of the security that we had. And that was my first opportunity of seeing what People Program can do to support individuals and the larger sense of well-being for the community. So of course, my practicum came to an end, and I got my degree and didn't leave People Program. I continued to volunteer, teach, even when I got an additional job. One of the requirements was that I be allowed to leave one afternoon a week early so that I could go out to Mirabeau and teach my class. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about what a beautiful place Mirabeau was. Entire city block, beautiful oak trees, huge gravel parking lot that was often filled with what looked like over 100 cars. And then you walked from your car to the building. And was it in the best condition? No, it was not. It was an aging building. But there was plenty of space and plenty of room. There was a huge all-purpose room where you could have 60 or 70 dancers at the same time. There were fruit trees on the property. There were small outbuildings where it was a craft building that was just totally dedicated to crafts. It was a kind of a shabby chic place. And of course, I found in the staff Mary Catherine Lombard, the director, Joyce Dassey, the assistant director, Eloise, the secretary, and the various other part-time people to be always very, very, very helpful. We also had on staff a full-time maintenance person who took care of all the needs of the building. In my newness to the field, even with the newness in the field, I could tell that this was a place where magic happened. And so when I was asked in 2004 if I would serve on the board, I very readily agreed. One of the challenges we faced in 2004, which will be very familiar to those of us who are currently involved in People Program, was a physical one. For several years prior to 2001, Barbara McCurdy had acted as development director for People Program, in addition to Mary Catherine being the director and Joyce being the assistant director. And the money she made from sponsoring Rhodes Scholar trips to New Orleans subsidized the entire program for years, so that tuition, which was always a concern, could remain low. After 9/11, travel habits changed. A lot of people were not traveling, and so the money source that had subsidized People Program dried up. So as board members, we were tasked with trying to come up with ways that could maintain the affordability of the program, at the same time meet our fiscal obligations. One of the things that we did was to hire a firm to do a strategic plan in 2004. And it was extensive. It involved interviews with members, board members, staff, and the document that was produced over a period of several months became a roadmap in 2004 for moving forward. Out of it, for example, came the idea for an annual appeal. Out of that same document came the idea for a gala, which we will be having very, very shortly. So I joined the board at a critical time, happy to see that the strategic plan came up with specific ways that the program could thrive and grow. Another incredibly important thing that happened that year was that the West Bank satellite opened. And none of us realized in 2004 just how critical that site would become a year later. Because of the extraordinary support of people like Father Alan Roy and parishioners like Max and Celie Winkler, the tirelessness of Dolores Hegler, the director. The West Bank was up and running and doing beautifully when Katrina hit in 2005. And because the West Bank had been spared the devastation of Mirabeau, it became the central place for the staff to work to try to search for people program members, some of whom died during the flood, some of whom died after the flood, some were displaced to other places. But they began to work and spent the next 2 years putting together a plan for reopening. Now, while it pains me to say this, not everyone was in favor of reopening People Program in the congregation of St. Joseph. There were people who wanted to just walk away and say, we've lost too much. I call this the Tom Benson effect, because you may remember that Tom Benson wanted to move the Saints to San Antonio. And I do understand those few sisters who were reluctant to try to open again, because it seemed like such a gargantuan task. How do you do that? You don't have a building. What you have is a big empty lot. How do you try to recreate a successful program when you don't have anything? You don't have people, you don't have any money, you don't have a place. I mean, this is not bibbidi bobbidi boo. You can't just pull these things out of a hat. But this staff, Dolores, Mary Catherine, Joyce, and Eloise, would not be deterred. They found 2 Methodist churches willing to have kind of a starter program, one in Metairie and one at the corner of Canal and Norman C. Francis. And that's where they decided that would be their jumping off point. Neither of those places were ever intended to be a permanent replacement for Mirabeau, but they were a place to get our feet on the ground. And then in 2000, and at the end of 2008, the Sisters of St. Joseph bought this beautiful building that we are in at 2240 Lakeshore Drive. And in January, on a snowy day in New Orleans, we moved in. It was momentous. It was difficult. Furniture, televisions, all the equipment that we needed, a dance studio to open, happened very, very quickly with the hard work of many, many, many people. And I want to mention particularly Jan Martino, Jane Dassey, because in July of 2008, we became the leadership team of People Program. And everybody rolled up their sleeves and did what they thought was the most important thing to do, was to get this place going. 2009 was a magical year for People Program. In the fall, we hit 500 members for the first time since Mirabeau. People were beginning to come back to New Orleans, and they wanted to be involved in something other than insurance claims and meeting with roofing contractors. So we scrambled for resources, volunteer teachers. We started looking for additional programming and realized that we wanted this to be an expansive, engaging on every level offering for the community. We hosted a group of almost 300 women religious here in this building. We formed a partnership with Tulane University's School of Medicine. And to this day, there are still students doing their practicum here with us. I think the latest one this semester may have been Aging and the Healthy Brain. And we got a lot of support from the chair of Tulane Center for Aging, Dr. Michael Jaswinski. We also formed partnerships with the New Orleans Council on Aging and its director, Howard Rogers, and wanted to align ourselves with a greater array of the aging population. We had our first showcase. We had our first boutique since 2004. We had our first summer session. And then in the spring of the following year, we had our first poetry reading, which was organized and supported by our poetry teacher, Pat Ward. So things were booming. Things were just wonderful, and people were so happy to be back here. Occasionally you would hear someone say, well, when we were on Mirabeau. You don't hear that so much anymore. There were challenges, of course. Even in a brand new building like this, there's never enough of anything, you know, when you're trying to build a program to offer to others. But there was such a willingness to work and to be engaged by the volunteers, by the staff. People bought into the program. And so when other challenges came our way, we looked to those same strengths to help get us through. I left the directorship in 2012 because of health issues that I was having. So I was the shortest tenured director, only from 2008 to 2012. But I have always felt that I was able to be a bridge from the very sturdy 25-year leadership of Barbara McCurdy and Mary Catherine Lombard, to the new directors who came after me. And those directors, like I did, had their challenges too. Probably our biggest challenge was 4 years ago when the coronavirus hit. And of course the whole world shuddered and people scrambled to do what they felt was the best. And our program closed for a very long time. One of the positives that came out of that was a leap forward in technology, which allowed us to hold classes by Zoom. There was a lack of strong leadership during that period, and so when you really needed a leader who was extraordinarily capable, we found ourselves coming up shorthanded. One of the positives that came out of that situation, however, is that the board grew stronger. Because we had a very strong board at the time, led by Myra Lewis, we were able to be guided out of what could have been a really terrible, terrible situation. And I think we are in the process still of recovery, but that we are well on our way to recovering. One other thing I think that suffered during that time is a level of inclusivity, particularly for the oldest members of our group, for whom the technology we were offering was beyond their capabilities or what they were willing to extend themselves to do. And that, coupled with their fear of being in groups, caused us to lose a number of people in their late 70s and early 80s who had been very long time members of People Program. Going ahead, there was always that tension between money and mission. And I will tell you a brief story that at one point I made a decision that we were going to honor teachers with an annual brunch. And we did that for several years, and that was a priority, whether there was money in the bank or no money in the bank. Somehow when it came time to write the check to the caterer, the money was there. And I remember getting a call from a sister of St. Joseph, and I held the phone out because she was screaming at me. Well, I'm not used to being screamed at. And Jan's office at the time was right next door, and she could hear the screaming coming from the phone. There was a conflict of opinion about whether we could afford to honor our volunteer teachers with lunch. And I said, we cannot afford not to. And we had lunch. That same money mission tension is something that Scott and Jan Phyllis live with every day. Every day. I wish I had a magic answer or a magic wand, I don't. I do know that the shortage of funds reduces what is possible for us. With such a small staff, it's incredible that they can accomplish everything that they do on a daily basis. But there's little time for thinking, what if? Maybe. How about that? Could we take time to explore this? Because everybody is working so hard and so furiously just to keep things going. And so because they're so good at what they do, we don't often recognize what we're missing if there was another person, another two people who might be out not just looking for money, but looking for other members, encouraging, speaking to groups, encouraging people to come. And I think that while money is of such great importance, we cannot allow the lack of money to change our commitment to the mission and our willingness to prioritize what is really, really important. We have huge maintenance needs in our building. I say our building. We have huge maintenance needs in the building that we rent. And it is our building, and we do take loving care of it. But it's showing its age. It was built in 1984, and it's now 40 years old and needs some work. So sometimes we wonder how we could replicate this program, or why it seems to be difficult to replicate. There's always the voodoo answer that it's got Sister Alice Marie's special sauce in it, and that's why you can't replicate it. And there are other programs nationally. There is the OLLI program offered by universities all over the country, where you can sign up for university level classes in photography or bird watching or 19th century Victorian philosophy or whatever. But those are more academically oriented. And as director, one of the things I tried to do was to bring some of that into this community to broaden it out. And there are golden age clubs, there are some large churches that have active senior groups. I think the key, though, is what happened at Holy Spirit. They came to us and said, we want that. And it's pretty extraordinary. I think that it happened, but it was the right church. It was the right pastor. It was the right leadership. And those are things that we don't have control over. And so when my mind goes too far down that road, I remind myself to back up and say, are there things at Lakeshore and at Holy Spirit that could be better? And if the answer is yes, put your focus there. And don't worry about attracting another location. Don't worry about expansion. Be the best you can be. Offer people everything you possibly can. And then maybe there'll be an expansion, maybe not. But as long as you're not offering your best, it will not happen. I also think that because we do not have a long-term plan, we don't have a map where people, the staff particularly, can focus their energies. The community has not had an opportunity to speak. And so one of the things that I think is most important is to find a way to have a strategic plan or something like it created, because the power is not so much in the plan as it is in what happens as you draw people together and you ask them, what would you like? What's important to you? And so that is my hope, that a strategic plan will be developed that will take the program forward in ways that individually we can't imagine, but collectively we would be able to. And this is such a beautiful place. I remember a year or so ago, I walked into the lobby and there was a student who had just come out of a classroom, and she threw her arms up in the air and she said, "I love my school." And I thought to myself, that's what this place does. That's what it does. It engages you and it makes you happy. You feel included, you feel positive, you feel engaged. And because of my recent illness, I can tell you that all of those qualities pervade everything that happens in this building. I have felt loved and supported in ways that are hard to measure. And so I have, as a symbol of all the love and encouragement I've received during the last few weeks, I have as a symbol a beautiful quilt that Sister Ann Bergen made, and the congregation gave me this quilt as one of my retirement gifts. And it has become a talisman for me, and it represents, I think, beauty, diversity, inclusiveness, warmth, comfort, and fun. I'm so happy to be a member of this community. I've missed you all.